Hi, everyone. Hey, you've built a beautiful, beautiful UI with Compose. And then you start getting these bug reports from users. Users who are using keyboard or, for example, a screen reader. And they tell you that they have some problems with focus. It, for example, jumps unpredictably, or there are some components that they can't reach at all when they are navigating around your app. And then you start fixing these issues. And when you fix the issue for one group, it doesn't fix it, like the fix you did doesn't fix it for the other group. And you start wondering, why is this? It should be fixed now. Well, here's the thing. In Android, there is actually more than one type of focus. And fixing these issues requires more than just thinking the focus as, well, one thing. And once you realize, once you know this, debugging and fixing these issues becomes so much more easier. And, today, that's the topic we're going to talk about. So hi, my name is Eeva-Jonna Panula, or Eeva-Jonna Panula, and I'm Android developer and accessibility specialist, and I'm from Finland. I'm also a Google developer expert, so GDE for Android, and I really, really love to share what I've learned. So I write a blog, I speak at different events, mostly about accessibility and Android. And I'm also a disabled person myself, so that's one of the reasons why I'm so motivated in sharing knowledge about accessibility. And when I don't do something work-related, I do different sports. And I also knit, and apparently I also develop some knitting-related Android apps, so that's like something that I've started doing, combining those things, so it's kind of already some work-related thing. But yeah, hey, you're not here to hear about me, so let's just continue to what we are actually talking about today. I already hinted that we are going to talk about focus on Android, and that's a word that I'm going to repeat many times today, and there's going to be probably some really lousy jokes about focusing on focus. But we're going to start to discussing what focus actually is. And then we're going to talk about code, so how you can actually control focus and fix those issues I mentioned in the beginning. And then the final section will be about visible focus and how, what you need to take into consideration when thinking about focus visibility. So, focus, what it is. What do I mean when I talk about focus today? Well, when somebody is navigating with assistive technology, such as keyboard or a keyboard emulating device, or screen reader, or switch access, voice access, other assistive technologies, well, focus, it highlights the currently active element on the screen. And it's a bit different for each of these assistive technologies. And today we are concentrating on two of them. So keyboard and keyboard emulating devices, so that's like the one group, because they work the same way if it's something that emulates a keyboard. And then screen readers. On Android, it's for most, it's TalkBack, so the built-in screen reader, but there are actually other screen readers, so that's why I'm using the word screen reader instead of TalkBack. And yeah, I mentioned that we are going to talk about keyboard focus. I might be using the word input focus, and my slides are using the word input focus, so when I'm using that word, I mean keyboard focus. And when I'm saying keyboard focus, I mean the whole thing, so also those keyboard emulating devices. And then for screen reader, well, I have a word accessibility focus, so that's the same thing as screen reader in this context. I could be talking about switch access as well, but here's the thing. I haven't found a way to actually control the switch, or the APIs to control the switch focus. So that's actually a different thing than keyboard or screen reader. So as mentioned, there are more than one focus types on Android. Let's then talk about input focus or keyboard focus a bit more. As I mentioned, well, it's related to keyboard or keyboard navigation or keyboard emulating devices and navigation. But also, for example, directional pad, so D-pad, goes into the same group. And things work the same way with it. And when a user is navigating with a keyboard, for example, the focus goes only to interactive elements, or it should go only to interactive elements, so not to text, for example. That's a common misconception that everything needs to be focusable for keyboard. That's not the case. Only interactive elements. So when you are building a UI and you have an element that user should be able to tap or swipe or do something else with it, then it should be actually focusable or available for keyboard navigation. And here I have a picture of the input focus or keyboard focus. And in the picture, there are two elements, a button and a switch. And these are, in the picture, they are actually twice there. And the first picture has the button focused, so when a user is navigating with a keyboard, when they are focused to the button, this is what it looks like by default. And then the unfocused state is actually on the second picture in the screen. And then for switch, the first one has the unfocused state, and then the focused state is on the second one. And I don't know about you, but for me, they are almost the same picture, so there is not big difference. And that's the case for Android. The default focus is really not really visible. And the default focus is actually the ripple effect there. So if you are removing the ripple, you're actually removing any ways of knowing where the input focus or keyboard focus goes. So if you remember this from this talk, I'm really happy. Because I know that there are reasons why the ripple is actually removed from different interactive elements. So please don't do that if you are not improving the focus for keyboard. So yeah, this is what the input focus or keyboard focus looks by default. Then the accessibility focus, so the screen reader focus. When user navigates with a screen reader, the focus actually goes to all of the elements, so to text as well. But you do not need to make these components focusable, so the text focusable, because the screen reader already does that. So you don't need to do that. So you don't need to, again, you need to just take care of the interactive elements so that users can actually interact with them and make them focusable. And here I have, again, the same picture in dark mode. And in the first one, there is a button which has a green rectangle around it, which means that, in this case, TalkBack is focused to this button. And then in the second one, the green rectangle is around the switch. And the good thing is you don't need to do anything about this indicator, because that's already handled by, for example, TalkBack or the screen reader that user is using. So at least something is handled by default, and we, as developers, don't need to care about that one. So that's a good news. But for other things, unfortunately, we actually need to do different things to make elements focusable or control them. And that's actually the next thing I'm going to talk about, controlling the focus. And this section is going to be code-heavy. It's based on a blog post that I wrote, and I'm going to share about that later. So this code is actually available somewhere in the internet, so you don't need to write everything down if you want to remember this. But you can always take pictures. But yeah, So for controlling focus, we need to be able to do 3 things. First, make the components focusable. So if you are building a custom component that's not like a button which is already focusable, then sometimes we need to move focus around programmatically. And then there are cases when we need to actually change the traversal order, so the focus order. And those are the 3 things that I'm going to talk about in this section. And as making a component focusable is the sort of the easiest thing to do here, that's the first one we are going to talk about. And when you are building a custom component, which has, well, a custom interactive component, you have a couple of options for making it focusable, so adding it to the focus order so that keyboard and screen reader users can actually reach that element. The first is using either clickable, selectable, or toggleable modifiers, depending on what the component is, like what it's supposed to do. So if it's something that user needs to be able to click, then clickable. If it's selectable, then selectable, so like a radio input group, for example, or toggleable, so a switch, for example. And then, if you are building a component that user doesn't need to really be able to click or select or toggle, then you have a focusable modifier as well. And this could be, for example, a case when you are building a graph, and the graph has some sort of like touch input exploration thing where user can like find the data points with touch. And then you want to make the user able to do the same with a keyboard, so they would be able they would focus on the chart and then with arrow keys change the currently selected item. Then you would want to use focusable modifier. One thing that's good to remember is that if you already are, if you are using a component that's already focusable, so built-in components like a button or text input field or others, do not add a focusable modifier there, because it already has focusability in it. It already has a modifier that adds to it, and if you add another modifier which would add it to the focus order, then it adds it to the focus order the second time, so it would be there twice. And then what that would mean for a user who is navigating with a keyboard is that when they navigate to that component and then they try to navigate to the next one, they would still stay in that same component and nothing changes, so it's really confusing. So they would need to press the button they are using to navigate forward twice. So if it's already focusable, don't add focusable modifier. That's a good thing to remember. All right, our component is now focusable. And then we want to move focus programmatically around. Let's say we have a button that when we press it, we want to move the focus to a custom component. And if we want it to work for both keyboard and screen reader users, well, we need to do different things for them. And I'm going to next discuss these different things separately, and we're going to start with the input focus, or keyboard focus. And here I have an example where there is a composable component. I wasn't really creative with the names here. So it's a component, and then it wraps a button, which moves focus when we click it, or it will move focus. And then we have a custom component to which we are actually focusing to. And it has this toggleable modifier, so it's already focusable. And we first, because again, this is for keyboard focus, and this is something that's documented pretty well in the Android documentation. So this might be, you might be familiar with this already. So what we need to do is first we want to create a focus requester, and we remember a focus request. This is always like when there is the same name and then a class we are using with the same name, it's kind of hard to say that we are creating a variable focus requester and then remembering a focus requester. So maybe in this case, the code speaks for itself more. But yeah, we are remembering a focus requester. Then for the component that we are actually focusing, we are setting the focus requester or like attaching the focus requester with a focus requester modifier so that like we can actually focus to that one. And one thing to note here is that as with many modifiers, the order of modifiers matters. So the focus requester needs to be before the modifier that gives the focusability to the component. So if focus requester is not working, the first thing to check is the order of modifiers. But OK, we've attached the focus requester to the component. And then the final thing is that for the button, when user clicks it, we call focus requester's request focus method. And then when user clicks it, the focus moves to the component where the focus requester is attached to. And this way, we can move the input focus, or like focus for the keyboard, for example. But then there's accessibility focus, and this is something that's really not documented well. And this is usually the thing that causes confusion. So I have the same component here, the button, and the custom component we're focusing, which has the togglable modifier. And this time, we start by defining a state variable called isFocused. And we set the default state to false. Then, for the component we are focusing to, we use the semantics modifier and set its focused variable to be the isFocused that we just defined. Then, we for the on-click handler in the button, which moves the focus, we set the isFocused to be true. And then we still need one thing here. We need to actually have a launched effect that listens to the isFocused. So when it changes, it checks if the isFocused is true, then we set it to false. So that like this focus moving thing could be used twice. Because if we didn't set it to false, then it would just, well, never move again. Because the APIs, or like how accessibility APIs and things with talkback or screen readers work is that when it changes to true, it moves the focus to the component, and then if it never changes again, the focus doesn't move to that one again. And here's the whole thing that you would need for accessibility focus. And of course, when you are building things and fixing things for both keyboard and screen reader users, you would like have these two things together. But as you can see, that it's already a bit like small text. I didn't want to try to fit everything into like one slide. All right, so now we have the ability to move focus programmatically. And then we have the, we have the one last thing in this section. So sometimes we need to change the traversal order, so the focus order. So basically, the order how the focus moves in the screen, for example. And by default, it's like when user starts navigating through the screen, they go from like the first element that's defined in like linearly in the the component structure. But sometimes we might want to change that. Good example, and this is something that's found in the Android documentation as well, is if we are building like a clock interface, like an analog clock, the underlying structure might be something else. We might set like, I don't know what the structure might be, but still like the actual components might be different than maybe we want them to be, or actually not just maybe, we actually want the focus to go from like first to the 1 o'clock, then 2, 3, 4, and so forth. But the underlying structure might be something else. So in that case, we would need to change the traversal order. My example today is way more simpler. I'm not using the clock. I'm using buttons here. And let's imagine that there are some reasons why this layout needs to be built in a way that there is a column that has 2 rows. And then like the text in the buttons tell the order that we want it to be in. So the first row would be first and third, and then the second row is second and fourth. And if like the default focus order would be that way, so first, third, second, fourth. And yeah, I know this UI could be built in a way that it's a row with columns, so that, sorry. Okay, I'm already confused myself. So in this case, like what I'm saying, it's a column with rows, and that's what we are changing. But it could be a row with columns. Yes, that's like how we could build it. But let's pretend that there is a reason why we need to have a column with 2 rows here. So this is just an example. And if we start looking at the code, here is the code for 1 row. And well, the second one would be similar, just with the different texts. And when we start fixing or changing the traversal order for keyboard focus, the first thing what we want to do is to actually create references for these different buttons. So in this case, I have first, second, third, and fourth, even though I just have like the first and third buttons here. But for the whole thing, we would need all of them. And then we would next attach a focus requester with these like references that we created, or focus requesters that we created. So the button with the first text would get the first one, and then the button with the third text would get the third one, and then of course second would get the second, and fourth the fourth. All right, now we have focus requesters, but we still need to do something there. We need to call the focus properties modifier and then set the next component where the focus should go with that focus properties modifier. So for the first one, we would set the second to be the next one in the focus order, and then for the third one, we would set it to be fourth. And that's it. This is the way we can make the like keyboard focus or input focus to work properly in this UI that I showed you. Then for the accessibility focus, it's a bit different. So we have the row, but we also have like we have the row, but a column that's wrapping it. It's also important here, so that's why I added it to this one as well. And the first thing we want to do is for the parent column that's wrapping these rows, or like the whole thing that where we want to change the traversal order, we want to call semantics modifier and set the isTraversal group true. And this way it would know where the for which group the traversal order is changed. Then we go to the row and we start modifying it. So yeah, for the buttons, we would call the semantics modifier and then set traversal index to it. So within this group, the first button would be the first. And then the third button would be the third. So that's why we are setting the traversal index to 1 and 3 in this, this slide. So yeah, sorry. I thought I had like one slide about this. But like, this is how we can actually change the traversal order for accessibility focus. And again, we would combine these to make it all work for both keyboard and screen reader users. All right. Then, now that we've actually, like, we are able to move the focus around and change things and change the traversal order, the final thing that I want to talk about is actually visible focus. And here I am returning back to the picture that I showed you before about keyboard focus. As I mentioned, for accessibility focus or screen reader focus, I don't need to, or we don't need to actually do anything for the focus indicator, because that's handled by the screen reader already. So we don't need to do anything about that. But for keyboard focus, we actually need to do something if we want to make focus actually visible, because I think the focus was not really visible with the default settings. And when I'm talking about focus visibility, well, when is focus visible? There could be different definitions for that, but today I'm using Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is actually a standard that's applying to mobile as well, despite the name of web, because it's usually used in the basis of legislation in different parts of the world. So when there is accessibility legislation, it's usually used on the basis. And it has WCAG, so Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I'm going to try to repeat that word here. It has 3 levels. So there is the first level, A, then the second is AA, and then the third is, well, AAA. And I'm not trying to talk too much about WCAG, because I could be talking a lot about it. But just to mention that these first two ones, so A and AA, are something that, like, if your app needs to comply with the law, that's usually the minimum what you need to comply with. And then the AAA is usually not included. And why I'm mentioning this is that in the AA, or there's a standard, or sorry, I slept really poorly last night, so I'm starting to realize that I'm actually forgetting some words here. So I'm really sorry. So that's why I'm rambling. But yeah, so there is a success criteria called Focus Visible, which is AA. So this is part of the legislation. So if you need to comply with it, you need to comply with this one. But the thing is that the Focus Visible doesn't actually define what is visible focus. But the AAA success criteria called Focus Appearance actually has some definitions for this. And it says that the focus indicator, or focus should be indicated with something that's at least 2 pixels wide, and it should have a contrast ratio of 3 to 1 between the focused and unfocused states. And that's what we are going to use in the following slides as a definition of visible focus. So it needs to be at least 2 pixels thick, and then it needs to have a contrast ratio of at least 3 to 1. And if we go back to Android's default focus, and back to the picture I showed you before, so here's the button and switch. In the first one, button is focused, and in the second one, switch is focused. And if we especially look at the switch, well, there is no border, which could indicate, or could be 2 pixels thick, and then have a good enough contrast ratio. So there's nothing like that. Then if we look at the colors, well, in the first picture, here's the hex code of what the switch background color is. And then here is another hex code. It doesn't matter what it is, but I just put them there. But the meaningful thing is, here is that the contrast ratio between these states is 1.3 to 1, so it's a fail. It's not 3.1, sorry, 3 to 1. So we want to do something about this. And if we want to make focus visible, here are some ideas for it. We could, for example, add a border around it. So I mentioned the border, that there was no border for the switch component. We could have done that. We could, for example, add a focus indicator and start padding. This, like, with something that's at least 2 pixels wide. Or we could, for example, change the background, which is used in the with the ripple, but it just doesn't have the good enough contrast there. So these are some ideas, but you could get creative. There are just some, couple of things you need to actually do there. So it needs to be at least 2 pixels wide, and then the contrast ratio needs to be 3 to 1 at least. I'm just going to show you one example, and that's adding a border, because it's probably the easiest way to do. And one way to do that would be with a custom modifier called focus border. And here we have, well, that custom modifier. It takes a, gosh, I'm really forgetting words today. It takes a parameter called shape, and we set it to rectangles shape by default, because that's what border actually uses, like the border modifier uses, which we are going to use in a bit, as the default shape. And then we define this, or we have this state variable called isFocused here, and we set it by default to false. Then we start building a chain of modifiers that we are using here. So the first modifier that we would call is onFocusChanged, in which we set the isFocused to be onFocusChanged isFocused. So if the component, the current component is actually focused, because we're going to need that information in a bit. And then we call the border modifier, and this is already getting a bit small. I'm sorry. I tried to read the relevant parts here. And here we set the width to be at least, well, 2 pixels or density-independent pixels, so that it fulfills the at least 2 pixels. And then we set the color, in this case, to be either the primary color or transparent color, based on if the component is actually focused. So this is basically the focus border here. And then we set the shape to be the shape that we are passing in, because sometimes we want to the shape to be, for example, the shape of the component, so a button if it has like round corners. And if you're wondering why we are setting the color based on the focused state and not the width here, well, the reason is that if we were setting the width, then there would be a slight changes in the UI when the width of the border changes. And yeah, then I also added a bit of padding to this component, but it's optional. If you want the focus border to be right hugging the component, that's okay too. In my case, it would be just having a padding. And unfortunately, you would need to add this to all the components that needs this visible focus modifier. So if you are having a, for example, design system, you probably want to do it there, or you want to build some an early version of design system just so that you can call those interactive elements and not this focus modifier to, or focus border modifier to all of these components everywhere in the code, because it's actually pretty easy to remember to add it. So that's the kind of the downside here. So yeah, you could be using a custom indication, but then remember that the ripple that is used, it's well, it has its purpose. So even if you're removing it and adding a visible focus indicator, then well, the REPL still has its use, so you probably need to do something with that. But yeah, just to wrap up, we've been talking about focus, what it is, and then how you can actually programmatically move focus around, how you can make a component focusable, and if you need to change the traversal order, how you can do it for accessibility focus and input focus, so screen readers and keyboards, for example. And I want to thank you all. My name is Eeva-Jonna Panula, or Eevis Panula. If you want to find my socials or anything, my website is eevis.codes. My blog is there. And I will post a link to the blog post I mentioned before to my LinkedIn and Blue Sky later. I forgot to schedule it. I was planning to, but I forgot to do that. So if you want to find the link, that's one way of doing it. Find me on LinkedIn or Blue Sky. And then one final thing before I say really thank you is that if you're interested in accessibility, we're going to have a roundtable tomorrow discussing different accessibility problems. It's going to be at 1:50. Please come there. And yeah, I think that's it. No, actually, one thing. If you have any questions, I'll be around. I'm not going to do a public QA. I'm not good at those. So if you have any questions, I'll be here for a while. And then during the conference, if you see me, just come and ask me. So yeah, thank you, everyone.